Oh, we're back. Sorry for the delay. I can explain. We'll get to that later. Already said data. I'm Anthony Fortner, data engineer. We got O'Grady, software engineer. Lee Markham, the database extraordinaire. We're glad to be back. I apologize, everybody. Last time we talked, I was in orbit past Mercury. There was a complaint about being boring. Well, I forgot that once I get to the other side of the sun, no communication, big blackout. That's a failing on my part. I'll make sure I plan my extra space travel in between sessions. All right.
Prefer
So
that, yeah. I appreciate next time you at least letting us know that you were not going to make it back from your orbit. But
yeah, that's on me. You know, first world problems are
yeah,
space
right.
problems. Or
First,
anyway, so I should be fine when I go to Mars. I should be fine. We're both on the same side of the sun. We're good to go. Um, Speaking of which, technology. I think the topic today is a look back at SQL Server 2012. That was a while ago. Why are we talking about SQL Server 2012, Mr. Lee?
Yeah,
yeah,
that was just a bit ago where we got a new SQL Server version. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is during the stream is because it's about to go out of extended support. So on July 12th,
Mhm.
so a little less than a month, there will be no more patches, even security patching for SQL Server 2012. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of take a look back to see what did we get in that feature, and kind of as a way to highlight Microsoft's ongoing um, passion about giving us new things with each version, and also we'll talk a little bit about what happened to the features. How did they develop? Were things added to them? Were they put on the back burner? Were they killed? That sort of thing. What happened with them? And yeah, that's the main goal. We're going to take a look back. We also want to talk about this as a way to remind everyone that you should be getting off of SQL Server 2012, and anything else that's older than that in your environment, you should already be off of. So
Yeah.
yeah, no
yeah.
production running these versions of SQL.
Oh, so I should dev on 2008, 2012?
But you're just saying
Um,
support is ended for him. You can still use them for as long as you want, right, Lee?
if you want to fall behind, sure.
Hey, you
Just
can
saying
juggle.
things that I'm
You can
sure that
juggle.
people will hear from their management when they
You
mention
can juggle
this.
chainsaws too, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. Uh, and you bring a good point. I mentioned, they shouldn't be running in production. That doesn't mean you can run them in dev. So just don't install them anywhere. They don't get any more security patches. SQL Server 2005 has been out of support for forever. 2008 and 2008 R2 have been gone for a while. If you're running any of that stuff anywhere, you should upgrade it immediately. You should put that at the top of your project list with your company. Get rid of that for a whole bunch of reasons: security, lack of features.
Going the way
So
of XP, Windows XP.
Yes.
so let's be honest though, Lee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if anyone's listening is a DBA type or junior or whatever, there should have already been conversations. Like today's not the day that someone goes, "Oh wait, really? Well, let's start talking about it."
Yeah.
Like this was coming. You should have been
Yeah.
planning it. But if not, I'm not trying to throw shade, but uh, hopefully there's some really, really good reasons and you have a plan to get off of it.
Yes. There are good reasons, and hopefully this isn't your first realization that life for SQL Server 2012 is over. If it is, then put it on the fast track to take care of business regarding SQL Server 2012 in your environment for sure.
So we should jump up to 2014, right?
Yeah, totally. Because
That's
that's
supposed to be
going
a
to be
segue.
out of support in 2 years. So you should make yourself upgrade as much as possible.
Is that the
By
standard
only
10-year support?
Yeah, yes, that's true. It's 10 years for extended support. Mainstream support, so that's a good place to start. What's the difference? Do you guys know what the difference is between mainstream and extended support for SQL Server? Well, it's probably Windows too.
I don't.
No.
Extended support, is that just security? They're promising
Yeah,
to keep it up secure wise, but
Hmm.
they're not gonna fix any bugs anymore.
exactly. So in extended support, you just get security holes fixed.
That makes sense.
Mainstream, they will fix bugs in the application and do security patching. So you still get feature enhancements, fixes to features, that sort of stuff while you're in mainstream support. Once that passes, which is 5 years, then Microsoft doesn't do any of that kind of work. They just plug holes. So,
That makes
so
sense because
SQL's,
they did that with XP, I know, as well, because
Mhm.
they had it available for like an additional 5 years, I think it was. I think XP actually went even longer than that because everybody was staying on it, and
Yeah,
they were like, "We're done. We have to have you buy
Yeah,
new products."
I think there was enough governments, and I'm not just speaking about one, not the whole US of A, but
Yeah,
there's a lot of governments and inside of government, small government agencies that I think we're just throwing money at, please keep XP going. We're not ready. Um, some people would say XP was like heavily adopted and everyone liked it, and then I don't know what the years were for XP, but I feel like it was just there during like the technology like explosion
during the
when all these
boom. Yeah,
companies, when all the companies transformed. I mean, of course, companies are already transforming, but like really, it became normal. Like now, it's weird to see a paper only company that doesn't exist.
yeah,
You know, um, so like when that happened, where like everybody was, you saw a two-man company because when computers evolved.
yep.
yeah. So see, Spirit Guide has a question out there. It says, should I learn SQL on SQL 99? Yes, totally. So SQL Server versions are 6.5, that the ones I know about, 6.5, 7.0, SQL Server 2000, 2005, and on up. We are hopefully this year in the fall going to get general availability for SQL Server 2022. So that'll be pretty cool. But right now, we're going to take a look back at what did we get in SQL Server 2012? What were some new features? How did those features fare over time? So I have a couple of articles that I've referenced just to kind of jog my memory because, 2012 was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
The very top of the list
A couple days ago was
for
2019, Lee. Come on.
oh yeah, okay. Um, one of my favorite features is always on availability groups. So this was brand new to SQL Server, and it was a great way to kind of extend availability and fix some things and some issues. So before this, you had database mirroring and you had log chipping, and always on availability groups are kind of like a marriage between log chipping and database mirroring. And so SQL Server actually got rid of, shouldn't say it that way. They marked for getting rid of database mirroring.
Deprecated.
So yes, but I wasn't going to use that word because not everybody knows what that means. They deprecated it. It means
Maybe that means we need to use it more often.
that's true. It's marked for bye bye. At some point,
Goodbye. So we're not
database
promising it's going to be there.
right, exactly. I mean, the idea is that at some point, database mirroring will no longer be supported in the product. Now, I think most things that get marked for deprecation stick around because so many legacy things are using them. Another example of this
Backwards
would be,
compatibility.
Yeah.
yeah, backwards compatibility. So things like SQL Trace or Profiler, for example. That's been deprecated since I think either SQL Server 2008 R2 or 2012. And here we are 10 plus years later, SQL Trace, SQL Profilers still works just fine. And SQL Server 2019, you just shouldn't use it because extended events is way better.
I think it's a big part of what's making SQL Server successful. I know it's a whole bunch of bullet points of why it's successful, but I really,
okay.
really think that the business types, how do I want to word this? Because things don't just break when you change versions, and you can make big jumps. And honestly, it's not that bad, because they deprecate things, but the things still work 10 years later. I
Yeah,
feel
for
like that's
sure.
a big reason why SQL Server has a leg up. If every 4 years you had a higher dev team to rebuild things like it's an Apple product, then people wouldn't be fond of using it for the backends, right?
Yeah.
Right. So always on availability groups, as I was saying, was a marriage of log shipping and database mirroring. So one of the restrictions in database mirroring is that you can only have one database at a time in a mirrored session. Well, that's removed in always on availability groups. So you can have an availability group is exactly what it sounds like. It's a container that allows multiple databases to live in the container and fail over together. And so that was a pretty nice enhancement from Microsoft's perspective, and for mine, I really love it. Um, the feature has fared very well over the years, in my opinion. There are a lot of people that you read on Twitter and on other places who don't like availability groups. They talk about all the problems they have with them, and I just don't see that. Like I had a good experience with them.
Mhm.
So I think they're wonderful. You should not you run always on availability groups on SQL Server 2012 though, uh, because it's a very complex feature because it relies not only on the SQL Server engine but on Windows failover clustering. So the operating system is involved also. And just like SQL, I mean, you guys maybe can't name features, but you know that the operating system has evolved from Server 2012
Yeah.
to 2019. There's new stuff in there, new
Yeah.
capabilities.
Hmm.
So some of those capabilities were in the failover clustering mechanisms that have to be in place in order for always on availability groups to be installed, configured, and used. So don't do it on 2012, but it was brought to life in 2012. It was given life. Lots of enhancements to this feature. You can get one of the cool things was readable replicas, and later you get a feature called read-only routing, which allows you to point an application to the same like logical, which is just the SQL connection in an AG. You point like a reporting application to that, and you in the string connection string will say application intent read only, and that behind the scenes the AG and the operating system will move that connection to a read only replica, and so the number of replicas has increased. I think you can only have like 2 or 3 replicas, read replicas, when the feature first came out, and you can have way more replicas now. I don't remember how many, but if you had a large reporting environment, that might be important, the number of replicas. And it would also be important for disaster recovery purposes. You know, the more replicas you can have, then in theory, the more places you could have for disaster recovery to fail over to in the event that your primary data center was lost. So really cool feature. Um, yeah, always on
I'm a
availability
big
groups.
a big fan of availability groups, and I'm a big fan of the read-only routing, like we talked about. So instead of setting up something complicated where you have a database you're writing to, and it's one way or other, all the changes, log shipping otherwise, to all these other machines, so that people can read those. You just make your availability group for all the reasons you want to make availability group, and then I'm gonna simplify here. Flag one as say this. You have the option of read-only routing, and then people with just all they have to do, all the app has to do is mention read-only routing, so to speak, in the connection string, and it's going to get that secondary. It's going to get that read-only secondary. So for the developers, it's like the simplest thing ever. Just, hey, you want a read-only connection? Do everything like you've been doing, but add this to the connection string, and then I can promise you a read-only, and I can promise you that everything will be a little bit more distributed.
Yeah.
Your writes over here, your reads over here. The DBA makes it seem easy.
Yeah, I think it helps developers because then they don't have to wonder, well, what computer am I supposed to connect to if I just want to do reporting?
Oh yeah.
Because the answer is the same one you always connect to.
Yeah.
SQL and the operating system move your connection behind the scenes for you. You don't have to remember.
And
I
yeah,
just had
once
an
those
idea.
of us that got to a little more knowledge of SQL, we were able to look at a certain availability group clusters, or dig a little deeper into where the actual data was coming from.
Sure.
But in reality, yeah, it was more, let's look at the group. I don't care where the data is actually living. I just want to access it, and that, so as a developer, I think that was a huge benefit.
Just had an idea live on the show. It's
Uh-oh.
just between me and you guys. No one else knows I'm saying this, right? So we have a missed opportunity to really. And anyone in the chat, all right, okay. So we may have a missed opportunity to sell this to developers, I think. Well, it's a PR mistake. This is what we should have done. We should have just told like that one developer, like, yo, Grady, I want to let you know that you could charge other developers $20 for a secret. And when you tell them, I can make it so all your connections to the prod database are totally invisible. You can get all your reporting off the prod database, and the DBA will never come after you. I promise. And then they hand O'Grady the 20. He goes, add this to your connection string, and they go to the routing, and they'll all use it because they think they get away with something. And the DBA is happy. And they're like, the DBA is not yelling at me. I'm like select starring all over the place. Don't do that. I'm kidding. Sarcastic. But I'm getting data off prod database. It's live. And no one's getting me. And then, of course, O'Grady has whiskey money.
Yeah, it's works out for everyone.
I love it. All right, so we're gonna move on to another feature here real quick, which is column store indexes. So before this, we just had what are now called row store indexes. In other words, you would have, when you build an index, let's say a non-clustered index on last name, first name. Well, the index would be horizontally across the rows that contain values for last name, first name. Well, and the nulls for people who don't put in a first and last name. That's a
Maybe
bad
they
example,
don't have
but
names. I don't know.
yeah.
Names are complicated. That's a tangent. Don't let me do it. Keep going.
Yeah, we're getting away from that really quickly. So instead of having an index on the row, you would have an index on the column. So you could declare a non-clustered column store index on last name, for example. And then it would, instead of having all of the data for that entire row for last names, it would just contain last name information. Is highly compressed, unlike row store indexes. A big drawback for SQL Server 2012 when it was first introduced was that it was not updatable. So if you created a non-clustered column store index on a table, it had to be a read-only table. So this was only good for data warehousing.
Which is it's the main use case, right? I'm not saying
Yes,
only, but like really, its bread and butter is for huge data sets that aren't changing fast.
yes, and that's still true. Later, you got a clustered column store index. So um, functions similarly to a traditional clustered index, but then you also got updatable clustered and updatable non-clustered column store indexes. You still should really only consider those for low usage tables. In other words, not a lot of insert updates and deletes. There are mechanisms now, of course, in the system to accommodate for OLTP workloads on tables that have where you place this particular feature. But you really have to pay attention to the ratio of insert, update, and delete on a table before you decide you're going to go down this road. It's still really primarily for reporting. So I've actually seen a customer get into big production trouble because they placed a column store index on a table that was changed a lot, and they didn't realize that they shouldn't do that, and it actually slowed down their system considerably. So it's a great feature, but like all features, it has its place.
Yeah, this is one of those features where it's one of these tools in the toolbox that you don't just try. You have to engineer it a little bit. You have to decide and do research first. Like I feel like
Yes.
with normal indexes, normal when you just putting your indexes on there, your column row your row indexes. Uh, you can kind of like just throw an extra one on there and see how it works a little bit, and it's not a big deal. But with column store, if you like, oh, I'm gonna do this as column store, it has major implications. A lot of pluses,
Yeah.
but the big minuses that you have to understand. So don't just try it.
Yeah, exactly. So you could look at, there are all kinds of dynamic management views in SQL Server, and some of those are specific to indexes and index usage and operational information. Will tell you during this time frame when SQL Server has been up, what has been the rate of change for the indexes. And you absolutely must look at that information over time on a table before you decide you're going to use column store indexes. And as much as you want to trust your best friend over in development who says, we don't change that table very much, you
What?
need to gather actual real data, because that best friend might not always be correct. I've had knowledgeable developers who know their stuff say, I don't think that the column store index will be fine there because we don't really change it that much. And I do a check and I tell them, actually, here's the rate of change. And they're like, really? I'm shocked by that. I didn't realize that we were updating that information as much as we are.
Mm-hmm.
So
A lot of times it's
do
like a
your due diligence.
trigger or something like that attached to a
Hmm.
table. And as a developer, I'm like, if I've never heard of that table, I'm like, probably don't touch it. Like, we probably haven't messed with it. And then, yeah, and then you realize that that's the main table being called after an update of something that's a trigger. And you're like, oh yeah, that one. So, like, 40,000 times a day, maybe? I don't know.
Right, right.
Been there.
Um, so column store indexes, great feature for certain use cases for developers, people working with data analysis, people who want to crunch numbers with the data. Fantastic feature for those folks. We get something called user-defined server roles in SQL Server 2012. So at the server level, you can create a read-only role that you dump people into and they get read-only for all the databases, not only that are on the system now, but that would be added later. Couldn't really do that before, uh, particularly not in this way. So, a great use case here is new developers who, junior devs who just need, well, the great use
How you
case
gonna
is
say
junior
this, Lee?
devs. Yeah, how am I going to say this?
Those that are not fully up to trusted standards of full access to databases.
There you go. So it's a great way to create a read-only role. You create an Active
Add-ons.
Directory group. You dump your people into the Active Directory group. You put the Active Directory group into this role, and then your system administrators can add and remove from the Active Directory, and that controls people's access. So it's a great way to do that. It's a big time saver for the DBA.
So what do you suggest putting in place in like that case when you have a role based access with Active Directory? Do you recommend that if someone wants to start doing it that way, even now, that they have a certain criteria on who can get access to what? How do you define that? It's not super on topic, but it's kind of on topic.
Yeah, so I would actually, if you're a newer professional, let's say you just took a role at
Mhm.
a new company, you left the old place in the dust, you're the DBA at the new place. You should actually do a whole bunch of other stuff first before you even touch this topic, because while they've hired you, your sphere of influence is small,
Yeah.
and this can be a landmine that you don't want to step on. You can really upset some people because when you start talking about security, no matter if it's database security or who has access to this particular Windows or Linux boxes or whatever. So my first advice about this is if you're new to the company, don't worry about trying to make changes to this. You
Yeah.
need to build credibility by doing a
Trust.
whole
Yeah.
bunch of other things first.
Tread lightly,
Once,
as you're saying.
yeah, tread lightly, build credibility by making impact in other ways. Then people get to know you, they trust you, they feel good about you, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes
Secondly,
sense.
that gives you time to measure the culture of the place that you're in. I've been in a number of places now, and the culture is different at every place. Some production is wide open to anybody in IT. Some it's just the more senior developers, and maybe you have a DBA. Some places it's only the DBA's touch production ever,
Yeah.
and the devs have to hand their code over to a DBA team just to get it deployed. And then if it doesn't deploy correctly, you get one shot at that. And if there's something wrong, then the DBA team gives it back to the devs and said, well, we tried. You need to fix this. And wait for the next maintenance window. So you have to feel the culture of your place first. Where do you fall in that spectrum?
Yeah.
Um, I think that this is a great use case for, well, I'll go back to the read-only role. A lot of companies, BI, business intelligence of all kinds is very popular, whether that's places still doing traditional analysis services through SQL Server, whether that's Power BI, um, whether that's the myriad of things that you can do in the cloud. A read-only role to let the analyst or the team of analysts um, have access to data so that they can build reports that executives want to see This is a great way to do that. You create the role in SQL Server. You ask your system administrator to create an Active Directory account, and sometimes an Active Directory account may already exist for that particular unit, that particular business unit. And they can just take that group wholesale and drop it into another group. If it already exists, then the DBA just needs to know what the name of the group is, and then the DBA can add it to a read-only custom role. So yeah.
Just to Spirit Guide's question, I think he was talking about like the different types of strictness of security. Do you want to answer that?
I have some thoughts, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you
Okay.
guys think?
Like, how would it
It-
change from industry to industry? I can.
Yes.
I mean, we obviously
Go for it.
talked about from programmers. Like in our industry, there's a lot of different roles that it would just be changing anyway. And then outside, I mean, I don't know how outside the industry, it really, who has access to databases is kind of more internal, right?
Yeah. So I think, so they Spirit Guide just clarified, like when you are, well, like when you were saying about how you have to feel out the culture of the organization.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there's a few different industries, and they have different thoughts about this. I've worked in the baking industry. I've worked for a major bake, and they're more on the side of incredibly locked down for obvious reasons, right? They're incredibly locked down. They would say, okay, we have this instance you're allowed to read from, and there wasn't a debate about who has access to read or update or anything. You just read. That's it. There was multiple teams that did different types of analytics and operational work, and none of them could make changes on the database, right? So extremely strict. In fact, any little changes or whatever went through tons of controls and review. On the flip side, we could talk about smaller companies. Like if it's a tiny company, they're growing, they're just starting up. It might be a little more loosey goosey, right? If the company's like developer led, where you start with 9 people, and it's one of the new modern companies that are like almost entirely IT people at first, the developers probably have a lot of permissions. They're probably, at least in their mind, hiring a bunch of senior engineers who are, knowing what they're doing. I'm actually not trying to trigger the DBA, right? Because, they know
You're
what they're
right on.
doing.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I wasn't sure if I was coming across like I was trying to trigger like I do sometimes for fun.
No, you're fine.
So the smaller companies, the leaner companies might have more access because they're trying to get stuff going. And at that point in their early VC, prehistory, they got tons of money to throw. Over time, they will evolve to be stricter. Hopefully, that will allow them to start hiring more juniors and have more of a healthy ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that I didn't even think about that as far as industry goes. I'm thinking IT as an industry, but I guess we are
IT
in
versus
every
not IT.
Yeah, we're in every industry, so that went the wrong way in my head.
No, it's fine.
But no, that being said, is kind of like Spirit Guide brought up there with HIPAA and stuff is, a lot of industries have these more lockdown for banking reasons or HIPAA reasons, or just personal privacy data, like companies I work at. When you have a person's full financial data, full everything about their life in your database, then it's like, well, maybe we need to lock it down a little more than if we're running a lemonade stand, whatever you're doing.
Right.
A quick distraction before I move to the next thing. We were poking fun earlier about, it's just between us, and you mentioned Spirit Guide. But I see some names in the chat. I'm filling out the chat in the moderator screen that I haven't seen before. So welcome everybody. If we don't mention you, personally, I'm not going to mention you if you're not somebody who talks in chat, because you might not want us to mention you. So feel free to lurk. We enjoy the fact that people are joining us. I definitely enjoy anytime I see a name I don't recognize. So awesome. Welcome to the party. Feedback's appreciated. And feel free to join us in Discord. Then you can yell at us and tell us about things you want us to talk about or tell me I need to stay on subject. Anyway, as you were, Lee, thank you for that.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
we appreciate our lurkers, and there's the Discord. If you do not have it yet, go join, hang out with us.
Yep. So the next kind of feature that was mentioned in the particular article was enhanced auditing. So there's a feature it's just called SQL Server Audit. And what it does is it uses a feature that was developed in SQL Server 2008 called extended events to figure out who done what and when. So there's lots of categories. You can use this at the server level to see who changed max stop to, 2, or cost threshold of parallelism from 5 to 50 or whatever. Who changed the minimum RAM per query to 20 gig. And I'm mentioning some wild things. Some of those I've actually seen happen. And we don't know who did it because we didn't have SQL audit in place. So this is a great way. And it's not just about catching people red-handed. It's a great,
Sometimes.
I mean, sometimes it is, but it's not just that.
Yeah.
Also, research information you don't have. There's so many questions have been asked that we could not answer, and we even think about it like this is no brainer. We can't do that. And now that we've had auditing and my environment for 6 months, more than 6 months, every once in a while we're just like, wait, we can look that up now. We can
Oh,
find
yeah,
out how many
now that
times somebody did
You
this.
like don't realize you had it, or you don't remember you had it. You're like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah, those are hard problem to solve until you have that in your environment.
I mean, it's
Yep.
from my side, it's the same as logging in development. I mean,
Mhm.
if we
Yeah,
don't have
yeah.
logging, and someone's like, "Hey, I had this problem happen," we're like, "Hey, when did it happen?" They're like, 10 o'clock. I'm like, that means nothing to me. Now I can be like, "Oh, we have logging, 10 o'clock. What happened? This user. Oh, you ran into this error. Cool. Here's how we're gonna fix it." But until you
Yeah.
have that, oh my god, pain in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, we can see with SQL Audit, you can see all kinds of things. I mean, like I said, it's connected to extended events, which has hundreds and hundreds of things that can act as triggers for extended events to capture information. And so that really helps SQL Audit be pretty wide as well in terms of what it can capture. So I think that it was just a server level feature at first, and then later came database level auditing. I'm not sure when that change happened, but if you're on a modern version of SQL Server, by modern I mean 2016 and up, and really at this time it probably should be 17 and up, but then you're going to have some enhanced capabilities from SQL Server Audit that you don't have to go pay a third party for. There are good third party apps out there, but if you want to audit SQL Server, you don't have to pay them to do it. You can use this. So I think it's a great feature.
That's I'm sure a big selling point for a lot of companies. If you can explain to them, like, well, we could pay someone to do this, or we can upgrade our SQL to a newer version that does it for us, weigh the cost on that, and I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a help. It
um,
helps.
it does. And if you already have something like Splunk or Logs.io or some other log collector software, I
Or
think
both for
SolarWinds
the
has
same
them.
application.
Yeah, those systems can also collect the SQL audit information. Now, there are some protections in place for this though, because there's a special function that has to be used to read the audit file. And then even once you do that, you kind of dig in and create a query to actually translate all the numbers in there into something that means something to a human being. So there's a lot of work. It's not a situation where you just turn it on and forget about it.
No, that's another engineering
But
feat. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's
but
even
I
with the
think it's
current,
worth it.
even with the current one, you're saying that's how you still have to kind of engineer it into the end
Yeah,
product.
so there's a special function that reads the audit file that it creates. And you can put the audit file to a directory. You can put the audit file in the application logs for Windows. That's neither one of those are very secure options. You can also put it into the system log. And the system log of the operating system is more locked down. It's more secure by default. So that's a good place to write the files to. So, but yeah, SQL Audit, great feature. Got it in SQL Server 2012. I'm sure that I would be surprised that um, that it hasn't had significant improvements to it since it was first developed. Because, as I mentioned, it's tied to extended events. So, kind of the next one is purely a developer-focused item, and I'll tell you I've not used this before. I knew it existed. But you get sequence objects in SQL Server 2012. Now, sequence objects are a little different from identity property on a column. So if you build a customer table, let's say, and you're going to put first name, last name, whatever in there, and you put a primary clustered key on there because you want to follow good table design, you'll often use the identity property to auto-generate numbers for you. The sequence does that also, but it's not tied to a particular table. So you can call a sequence across multiple tables. So what you do is you create a sequence objects, which is just something that's going to generate numbers for you. And then an application can actually call that function, can call that sequence object, get a number, and then do whatever else it needs to do. And it can do that across multiple tables. So, yeah. The light bulb
so
come
is it
on.
like
What do you got?
yeah? So is that like you have three tables, but you want an identity that is unique across all three tables because all three of them need to use that same sequence.
So across three tables, how it would work is if you go to insert one row into each table, you call the sequence to get numbers. For table one, the first call, you would get sequence number value of 1. Then the second table would be 2. The third table would be 3. So you would get values of 1, 2, and 3 respectively in each of those tables. You can call, there's ranges, so you can specify start at 1, go to 1,000,000, increment by 4. I don't know. You can also then say, give me a range of numbers between 4 and 20. If you know you need 16 rows, for example, I don't know. So it has a lot more flexibility than the identity property. It'd be
Very
something
interesting.
kind of fun. Yeah. I think this solves an issue where and we've run into this before, where applications are architected, and what you really need to know is you need to know the identity value before you're actually given it. And this solves that problem because the system, SQL Server, will generate a sequence number for the application ahead of time.
So then you already know what they're going to be or what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then you can avoid things like using the application GUID as your clustering key in your table.
I was already about to make a joke about when you're like, you can do like a number sequencing of random numbers between 1 through like a GUID, like a generated number.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
The epic
Let's see.
GUID battle, they'll never end.
Yeah.
The other
Sorry,
thing that you can,
I cluster everything on GUIDs anyway, so it's fine. It's fine.
All my
So-
primary keys are GUIDs. It's fine.
I don't know what to do with you two.
At least we know
The
the
other-
jokes to make that are wrong.
Yeah, there
That
you
says
go.
something. That says something, right?
Yeah. The other thing that you can do with this more easily than with the identity is you can restart the number when you reach a specified value. You can go back to the beginning and reissue numbers.
So
Yeah,
what happens to
could
the
be
ones that
interesting.
were previously issued? Is that
I don't know.
okay?
I don't know. I haven't tested it.
Oh, okay.
That particular thing is just something that I saw in this article where I got information, was reminded about sequences. And it says, the application requires to restart the number when a specified value is reached. So apparently you can do that with sequence. I don't know. That's a great question. What happens to the other numbers? And also, as a DBA, I'm wondering, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
numbers
you
go pretty
guys could
high.
know.
So
Uh,
I think identities sometimes do get gone, they get deleted. So like if you have, I'll use your example, a bunch of user data, and you go you made it to 10,000 because business is good. You have 10,000 users, and then there's been some, I can't remember the law, but you have to remove people's data, right?
Oh, yeah, the
GDPR.
GDPR. I knew it
Thank you.
started
Oh
with a
my
G.
gosh.
Oh, I hate
I
that
might have
so
to,
much.
I might lose my DBA card because I forgot about that. Anyway, so no one will tell. Everyone in chat's great, so they won't
No,
tell
yeah.
anybody. So
Yeah, everyone's
you delete
GDPR
some information.
compliant.
Oh, once you delete all the information and you can't have it anymore, those identities are gone. Now, why
That's
would you
true.
reuse them? If you've actually made it to the end of big int, you got other
Yeah.
problems to figure out than going,
Yeah.
is there a few extras? Like, is 7,223 in use right now? You got some problems you got to solve, and probably fast. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why they go away.
Maybe
Yeah.
if you're doing a sequence, let's say you're going 1 to 100, and like you said, you can skip every 4. So maybe then it gets to 100, and then it starts over at 2, and then skips every 4. Then I don't know.
Could
I'm just
be.
thinking of any
Yeah.
type of reasoning there. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I guess it's all just made to probably make life more difficult on numbering. Who knows?
Yeah. So a couple of more things here. I'm going to move down. Well, I'm going to talk about pagination, and then I want to come back to talk about PowerShell.
Sounds a lot like Page Nation.
That's
The
what I say.
reason
Is
I want to talk,
pagination like pagination?
yeah. So I want to talk about that because I know that it's a big problem to solve for developers. You have an application that, maybe there's 50,000 rows. I don't know. Obviously, you can't show 50,000 rows of data on a web page.
Challenge accepted.
So
I've seen it.
And have it be readable. How about that?
Or fast.
Or fast. So pagination, there were ways to do it in SQL Server prior to this, but they have in SQL 2012, they introduced something called offset fetch with an order by, where you can say a range of rows between X and here, 1 and 10, I don't know. Show me those rows. You can skip rows. You can say start at 5, row 5. I don't know why you would want to skip the first 4, but you can do that. So there are new ways, or a new way in 2012 was introduced to solve the issue of pagination for development.
Surprised that, I know we're making fun that 2012 was so long ago, but I'm surprised 2012 is when they added that. That seems like
That's what I was saying. Yeah,
a very early day thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
I know, but like you're saying, as a developer, that's a problem we ran into a lot when we all worked together. Was just having pages of stuff and then being able to sort those, because man, I know not everybody's super in depth on development and how it all works, but like when you get your full set of data and you're like, hey, show the first 50, it's like, cool, that always works fine. It's when you're like, now show the next 50, without getting rid of the first 50, and know that you're on page 2, and know that you have another page this way and one page. Oh my, it gets so rat's nest so fast.
Yeah, it gets convoluted. But this is why this known pattern is supposed to follow, right? This is why that's the case.
Mhm.
And SQL Server's
Right.
like, hey, we have it built in.
Yeah. So without that, I don't, and that's with using it. So even without it, it's like, or if I ever had to do it without it, I would not want to. We'll say.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They also had enhanced error handling was introduced in SQL Server 2012. So you up to that point there was a raise error, and you could raise an error, and you could create your own custom errors, and you still can. But there's a lot of T-SQL writing, a lot more went into it, and now you can just do something like begin try, then do whatever work you're going to do, followed by end try. And then you could do begin catch and then throw, then end catch. And the throw statement will do what it sounds like. It will throw an error for you. And it's a lot less typing and makes things just a lot more simple.
So curious, and you might know, you might not know. So a lot of the stuff that's in T-SQL, like writing SQL, just like you're mentioning throws and try catch blocks, is that stuff that was pulled from the development world on like the .NET side or like the C Sharp? I guess it started probably in Java, but is that stuff pulled from the development side into SQL, or is that the other way around? Because I think it'd be more powerful on the database level, obviously, because you're closer to the data, you can do more with it. But
Are you asking if like the developers request that from Microsoft,
yeah,
or
like did it come as a development feature first and then go to a SQL feature, or did it go from a SQL feature to a
I
development
have
feature?
to I have to assume developers had it first. I have to assume that inside of SQL Server's code, this try catches from the developers who built it.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as exposing it to SQL developers to utilize,
Yeah.
I think that came after. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lee. I'm making a guess.
Yeah, I would guess as well that it comes from the developer side. They know how to do these things from their development world, or maybe even from another database system, and they're frustrated because they can't do it in SQL Server
Yeah.
Yes.
the
That
way
makes
they're
sense.
used to, or maybe they can't do it at all. Like with the sequence thing, that feature, I mean, there was no way to do that with SQL
Mhm.
Server before. You couldn't take a range of numbers, generate them outside the system, and then insert them into multiple tables, and that just doesn't work without a whole bunch of convoluted code, and nobody wants to do that. They got a whole bunch of other T-SQL enhancements. There's a choose, there's an if. So you can, if you had a range of numbers, you can actually use choose to select the numbers that you're interested in. Again, I've not used this. I'm not a developer, but I'm bringing it up because SQL Server and Microsoft are always about trying to uh, enhance the product, make things easier for everyone, not just DBAs. And so that's a lot of why you get T-SQL enhancements because they make things easier and better for other people. There are functions with conversions, like there's a parse conversion function. There's try parse. There's try convert. There's date from parts, time from parts. There's an end of month function. So if you need to know what the last day of the month is, you can use that.
That's useful.
There's a format function that I've seen people use for dates. There's concat. Later on, there is concat underscore WS, which is concat with separator. So I'm more familiar with that. If you needed to build a string in SQL Server, you had to do a whole bunch of quoting, and you had to use plus signs in between, and you had to account for, okay, if I want to merge first name, last name, and surname, or first name, last name, and whatever we call Mr., Miss, Mrs., that has a name. What
Title.
is it?
Prefix.
Title. Thank you.
Prefix title.
Oh.
Yeah.
Prefix. Yes. So if you want to merge all that together before
Suffix
you had,
also. If they're junior,
yeah, it was difficult. It was a lot of typing, a lot of quoting, and then you had to put spaces. If you get first name, then you had, when you were quoting, you had to leave an extra space there, and then you put your plus sign, and then you quote the last name,
Mhm.
blah blah blah. Well, concat does all that stuff for you, and the syntax is so much cleaner, and
Oh yeah.
it's less typing. So
So
there's a lot of
concat
good
you
things.
said was 2012.
Yes, you get concat in 2012.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Like that was a big time saver.
All day, every day.
Yeah,
Right.
always use almost everything I write. It's like concat.
The choose one you mentioned is one that every time I see it, I think, oh, I should start using that. I always forget about it. That's on me though, because like you can have a list of values in there, and then the number you pass in gets you which value you want. The easy low-hanging fruit option is like if one, then January, if two, then February, if three, then
Oh,
and then you
yeah.
have these big ugly statements. So they choose the number that is being passed in January, 3rd, March, April, May, June, July. And then
So it's
they
kinda
put
like,
whatever number they put in.
kind of like a case statement.
Yeah, but it's a one-liner. Not that I'm playing code golf, but yeah,
Well, no,
but it's like
yeah.
a one-liner, right? Yeah. You can just have your list, the number goes in, and if you've used it more than once, it's super easy to read. Where case statements aren't usually. I mean, if it's one,
Depends,
this, two,
yeah.
that, three, that, then it's not that bad. But
But then you
Um,
also have this much real estate that you're wasting on your query.
yeah, and
I mean,
SQL
I'm
statements
assuming
already
everybody's writing their case statements and
Yeah.
horizontal,
vertically.
vertical patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, SQL's already really vertical, in cases makes that worse. And especially if it's mine, I'm vertical, white space. I'm very picky about my formatting.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Ozar's last video, he went off on me. He just doesn't know it.
So a couple of other things. There's one thing I didn't even know existed until I was doing research for this, just to kind of jog my memory about, well, what was new in SQL Server 2012. You can use something called execute with result sets. So if you have a stored procedure where you're selecting like the first name, last name, and an address from a table.
Yep.
Normally you would just say, exec dbo dot my procedure, and you just get the column names that whoever wrote the procedure set for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can use this to change the name of the column if you want. I don't know why you would want to do this. I don't have a use case yet, but there has to be one, or
Yeah, they
this
wouldn't make
feature
it.
wouldn't
Yeah.
be here.
No.
So you can call exec my procedure with result sets, and then in some parentheses later, you can actually change, like, instead of getting first name back, it would just say name,
Okay.
is the example I came across. So that was kind of cool. I was like, oh, it's something in 2012 I didn't even know about.
I've
And
never.
yeah.
I'm with you there. There's got to be a reason for it, though, other than just change the column names. But I don't know.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason. I just don't know why you would do it yet. But I mean, if I did some more research, I'm sure I could find a use case for it.
Yeah, I wonder if
Um,
on the programming side, as far as like maybe in a stored procedure or something, if a developer is looking for a certain type of data or something that I don't know.
Maybe you
Simplifying
can
the
change the stored
names.
procedure. Maybe you can't use the stored procedure. But you can't change it. It's being used all over the place. But for this new use case, you kind of need to change it. You tweak the results,
Mhm.
so you're not changing the functionality. Maybe it's kind of like changing the interface. If you're okay with me calling the output an interface.
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that. A couple of other things are PowerShell support, distributed replay, and big data support. And then we can kind of start wrapping up the conversation. So enhanced PowerShell support. I really feel like this is huge because I feel like it really led to the rise of PowerShell to manage SQL Server. And it led to things like DBA tools, which is a great command module for PowerShell. You can pretty much anything that you can do in SQL Server Management Studio through the user interface. You can use DBA tools or the SQL Server PowerShell module to do the same, up to and including development. So you can create tables, insert, update, and delete tables through PowerShell, all of that sort of thing. So if you're building some sort of automated process and you need to, create tables and insert, update, delete, you don't have to do that separately. You can do it right inside your PowerShell. So, an example of that would be recently I built something from PowerShell that would help us with application failovers. So it reads what the current IP address is for the online SQL failover cluster network name. And we get that IP address, and then I use that in the PowerShell that comes after to update an existing table with the IP address that I need from the cluster so that the application can then connect because it needs the IP address. It won't work or connect with the cluster network name. It has to have the IP, and that IP gets stored in a table. Well, this is a way that I use PowerShell to manage that whole situation. So it's really good. PowerShell is powerful. It's a great thing a great skill set to have. And I think even developers should know something about how PowerShell works because it's so useful.
How often do you I don't think you work with a large variety of DBAs, that often, right? Um, but how often do you interact with DBAs who don't use PowerShell or haven't used it? It's like I thought for a while it was like de facto, right? I think it's great. I use it for a lot of maintenance. Why do things hard when you can do things easy? But
Yeah.
I give you a surprise interviewing people and talking to people that they don't have that in their tool belt. DBA specifically.
You are surprised that they don't?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
telling you right now, I'm surprised hearing that because to me, like everybody in IT should know how to use PowerShell.
yeah. I think
Not knocking on anybody that doesn't know it, but I'm saying if you don't know it, you should brush up on it. There's a lot of classes and courses you can take, but it's good to have
absolutely
in your tool belt.
it is. I think it's slow to get to the database folks because database folks default to T-SQL. And they have a
Yeah.
language that can do a lot of stuff. It's really powerful. T-SQL is. Um, some things, maybe you shouldn't use T-SQL for, but you can, and people do. But I think that's a big part of it. They're just used to the T-SQL language. They understand it. They default to what they know, which is what we all do for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's been slower to get into the database realm. I do see it becoming more and more popular. More and more people seem to know about PowerShell and use it for database work. And just yesterday, there was yet another meetup from the SQL Server world where somebody well known was talking about PowerShell for the DBA and giving an introductory, 1 hour talk on getting started with PowerShell. And I have like a 3-part series on my blog about getting started with PowerShell. So I think it's becoming more common that database folks know about PowerShell.
Agreed.
Makes sense.
I
I
think a
got some
lot of
things that I
people.
probably should be better at.
Yeah, I mean we all got our things we need to brush up on and learn, but I think the big thing with PowerShell is to make sure that people don't look at it like another command prompt. I think a lot of people are like, oh, just either one, PowerShell or command prompt. And I'm like, well, there are differences, which may be for another topic in general, but
Ooh, a new topic.
Yeah.
yeah, PowerShell 101. Especially
Yeah.
once you get in my world, once you start getting into programming like Angular and that kind of stuff, that's a necessity, in my opinion. So
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear about that actually. Maybe we could all talk about things we use PowerShell for.
yeah,
Because we don't get super technical. We tend to talk about subjects, so that might work. And then all three of us probably have totally different use cases. Well, I sense a Venn diagram with me and Lee, big time. But still, I think we still have some unique stuff to bring up.
Right.
call it the one blue screen we like.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah, we like that blue screen. So two more, and then then we'll be done. I
we're good.
rattled some of them off. Distributed replay. So distributed replay lets you capture a workload and then replay it somewhere else, which sounds like a fantastic thing. It allows you to do testing and A/B testing, for example. Meaning, I run a test, I make some changes, I do my B test, and then I can compare that sort of stuff. I did see a headline today that I didn't read, though, that said that this feature is actually being marked for deprecation in SQL Server 2022.
Just to try and decide if I want to bring that up.
Oh,
So
so we're talking about something that was
I,
introduced and is about to be gone.
yeah,
Use it
so
while you can.
In the span of 10 years, it's gone. Some features are like that, like policy-based management is still around, but I don't think it's being actively developed. I don't remember when it came out. Dunce asked a good question. Is it being replaced? I don't know, but my guess is no. And the reason is because that A/B testing I mentioned can now be done with an even more modern feature called Query Store.
Okay.
Um,
So it has a relevant moving point moving to point if you still want to do that type of programming or whatever you're using it for.
yeah, if you want to
One,
do A/B testing,
oh sorry, timing must be getting weird.
go ahead, Anthony.
I hear from what I hear, one is difficult. The distributed replays. I hear word that I've never used it, never attempted it. That it's finicky. It's hard to set up. It's hard to continue to use. Let me know if you think otherwise. Because I'm saying I'm that not personal experience. And Query Store doesn't seem to be. I'm probably at like 10% knowledge of Query Store. I tend to only look at it when there's an emergency.
Yeah.
But it seems easy to use. Like it has a graph, it has bubbles and squares and change size based on information, and it's a poorly made Power BI report. So go on. Sorry.
Also,
These
a
are,
little tidbit about the square, about the colors and things and the shapes in Query Store. If a query is, if you see a square, that means that query was canceled or aborted. So it's a little
so you
tidbit
see,
there.
yeah. So the an outage I had last week, circles going up, all squares, circles.
Yeah,
So it's telling a story, which is what any graph should do, right?
yeah. And then they have big data support. The article I said, or that I came across, says one part of this involves Microsoft releasing ODBC driver for SQL Server that will run on a Linux platform. Additionally, Microsoft is building connectors for Hadoop, which is an extremely popular NoSQL platform. Also, this led to, I think this eventually morphed into the Polybase feature in SQL Server 2014 and external tables in SQL 2016 or 17. So with the advent of cloud and Azure Synapse and other cloud things, I don't know if this is going to continue to be a thing. I don't think they're going to take away the big data support, but I think they're going to do so much in the cloud that maybe there'll be less emphasis on those kinds of drivers and connectors. But maybe they'll just shift all of that in and shove it all into the cloud. I did some pretty cool kind of proof of concept work some years ago where we created an external table to an AS400 system that we all were familiar with.
Yeah, from
And
AS400, yeah. Oh, well, I guess, never mind.
yeah,
Wording's
from
weird.
SQL Server to AS400. And so what that did was it meant that if you wanted to select data out of the system, that you didn't have to, the developer didn't have to get the AS400 syntax anymore. They didn't have to look up, okay, how do I do an order by in the AS400? Because it's different. If I wanted to do pagination with the data from the AS400, how do I do that?
You do it through SQL, and then you call your AS400. You deal with it there.
Yeah, you point
Yeah.
it at the external table, and the driver underneath translates your T-SQL that you already know how to write into something that the AS400 understands. So
It
I
all
think
shows
that's
up
pretty cool.
shows up in red on your screen, and you're like, I don't want to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Oh, AS400.
So we got lots of cool things in SQL Server 2012. Lots of things that are still very usable. And many things that are still in the product, whether they're exactly the same or slightly different now. But it's time to say goodbye to your SQL Server 2012 instances. If you have them, you need to get rid of them. You need to be planning to migrate, and that's another topic that we can talk to or speak about at some point is migrations and database and application migrations, and how do you do that? How do the two things work together? How do app dev folks and GBAs and SQL developers all come together and work together as a team to move major applications? I mean, that would be a great conversation for later. But yeah, end of support, July 12th, 2022 for SQL Server 2012.
I feel like we need the Sarah McLachlan song playing and like SQL going across the screen. I will remember you.
That's great. I love it.
That's
Do we have anybody to rate or any last comments or thoughts before we close out?
I'll say I do have someone to raid. So as we close out, you guys can give your last comments here, and I will get the raiding party ready.
Okay.
Yeah. So goodbye to 2012. But a lot of those features you mentioned, we still use. A few of them are deprecated, but a lot of them are a mainstay. We got a reaction off a couple of us about things we definitely use. There's at least one thing I realize I should have used every once in a while, but it never popped up on my radar. So yeah, 2012 may be going away, but its legacy continues.
For sure.
Yeah,
So,
Who are we rating?
and I agree with that though. That's the little I know, or the more I know actually as a developer, but the little I know from your guys' side, a lot of that stuff that was introduced in 2012, yeah, like Anthony was saying, that's some staples that I see on a regular basis. So that's cool that's where it came from, and it's getting sunset, but luckily most of those features are still around or transformed in some way to still be useful. That's always good. And the ones that go away, usually it's because there's a reason they're going away.
yeah.
But we are
Sometimes
we're gonna,
technical, sometimes strategic.
Yeah. Sometimes they're like, we want you to do stuff this way now, so we're gonna take away the other way that you could possibly do it also.
Have you heard of Azure? You should come visit.
Yeah. We are gonna go raid another tech channel here. It's a Tech Talk Thursdays with Major Linux and
Ooh.
Cool.
I'm not exactly sure what they're talking about today, but it is it's something. I can promise that.
It's Linuxy.
Gotta see if I can.
But see, I mean, if
Okay,
I
I was
see a
making sure
cat.
that this category. All right.
I'm distracted now. I see the kitty.
My cat plays fetch too. I don't know. He's pretty cool.
I have one of those. It's the coolest thing.
I sit here because if you look out of my office, you go there's a down the stairs like the front door, so it's on the second floor. Yep. And I sit here and he brings me this like shiny blue foam ball thing that I don't even know where we got it, but it was like off a present or something. It's like something so cheap and it's like tinsel kind of reflective ball. But he always brings that to me, and then I just take it and while I'm working I'm just like I throw it all the way down the stairs to the front door and he just takes off and then brings it back and just I'll sit here for 20 minutes
That's
just doing
funny.
like well yeah, wear yourself out. Go for it. So that being all said, we are gonna raid Major Linux, so stick around. Anthony, if you want to throw the stuff into the chat for the Discord and Twitters,
On it.
we will get our raid going. Make sure you stick around, hit follow for them. If you do not already follow us, make sure you hit a follow on ours as well. We try to get here every Thursday. Sometimes real life happens and it doesn't happen, but we're gonna try to be more regular at some point in our life. So.
Our databases are reliable, but we're not.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm reliable for work.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go drop us a follow on Twitter and hit the Discord up, and we will catch you guys around. I'm O'Grady. We got
I'm
Lee,
Anthony.
Anthony.
Lee.
All right. We will catch you guys next week. See y'all.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.